see, this is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you my monthly recommendations video for the month of July. Monthly Recommendations is a Goodreads group created by Trina from Between Chapters and Kayla Rain. I'll link the group and all of the information down below. Every month they give us a topic, and anyone can make a YouTube video or a blog post recommending books for this topic. This month's topic is auto-read authors. So these are authors that you will automatically buy or read a book because they have written it. And because of the nature of this topic, this is going to be a list of books that I talk about a lot on this channel, a list of authors you will have heard me talk about a lot. So I think this is going to be more of a ramble or a discussion video about what it means to me for an author to be an auto-read author. I'm not sure there are really any authors currently publishing books that absolutely 100% qualify for me. But there are a lot of authors who are pretty dang close for whatever reason or another. So I'm just going to talk a bit about these authors and what I've read of theirs and why it makes me think that I will want to read more of their books, with the exception of the first author on this list, who is probably the closest to a true auto-read author for me because I have already read all of her books, and that is Robin McKinley. The thing about Robin McKinley is that not many people actually like all of her books. Her books are really different from one another. If you like her fairy tales, you may really hate her urban fantasy. If you like her urban fantasy, you may be frustrated with her Damar books. There are, however, a very few rabid fans who would read an annotated phone book if she wrote it, and I happen to be one of them. And I think that's the closest thing there is to having an author who is a true auto-read author for you. That author could write something absolutely atrocious and you would still read it. So I have said that I have already read all of Robin McKinley's books. That's not quite true. She has short stories in a couple of anthologies that I own but have not yet read. But I've read all of her novels. And at this point, it's not 100% clear to me if she has any more books in the works, if she's going to. I know that for the past couple years or so, she's had some really crappy stuff happening in her personal life, and in recent months she's kind of completely disappeared from her internet social media presence, so I really have no idea what's going on with her. And as a reader, I don't feel that I'm at all entitled to demand anything of my favorite authors. I don't feel like I'm in a position to demand that she finish her unfinished Pegasus trilogy if she isn't at a point in her life where she can realistically do that. That said, if she emerged from her internet hiatus saying, "I have written a thing, it's going to be published," oh my gosh, I would be the first to pre-order it regardless of what it was. The next author on my list is an auto-read author for me for completely different reasons, and that's Juliet Marillier. So Marillier is an author who often gets compared to McKinley because the things she writes resemble some of the things that Robin McKinley is best known for, but I've not rabidly adored anything of Juliet Marillier's. The reason that she's an auto-read author for me is that her books are really, really reliable. You basically know what you're going to get with a Juliet Marillier novel. All of her novels are historical, medieval, fantasy, often fae fantasy. The only things I can think of that she's written that aren't historical are her Shadowfell trilogy, which are YA, and those are secondary world, but they still feel really similar to all of her other books. So basically, I feel like I know what I'm getting with a Juliet Marillier book, and I know that she's not going to let me down. So what I've read of hers so far is her first 3 books in the Seven Waters series that was the original trilogy. This one, Daughter of the Forest, Son of the Shadows, and Child of the Prophecy. I've read her Shadowfell trilogy. I have read her Blackthorn and Grimm trilogy, which are her most recent books. And I've also read Heart's Blood, which is a standalone. Now, what I own of hers that I haven't yet read are Wildwood Dancing, which is a young adult fairy tale retelling, and I have the first books in 2 of her series that are much lesser known. So I can't totally promise that I will read all of her books. She has an extensive backlist. She is still writing. And that's another thing with the idea of an auto-read author for me. If an author is still writing, and they already had a lot of books out by the time I discovered them, then I can't really be certain that I will ever get around to reading all of their books as well as keeping up with whatever they publish next. So, for example, I may just decide that I'm not going to read the continuation novels of the Seven Waters books, just because they aren't that high priority for me. I may decide if I start one of her other series that I have the first books of and it's not holding up, it's not living up to the other books of hers I've read for me, I may decide that that's also not a priority for me to continue with those series. But essentially, I have no aversion to the idea of reading any of her books that have been published that I know of. So right now I'm sort of operating on the assumption that eventually in the long term I will get around to all of them someday, probably. Another author who has a really extensive backlist that I've only just started to dip my toes into is Patricia A. McKillop. So what I've read of McKillop's are some of her oldest fantasy books, the Riddlemaster trilogy and the Forgotten Beasts of Eld, and I've also read The Bell at Sealy Head, which is one of her less old-fashioned books. I feel like there's a really distinct difference in style between something like this and those other books of hers, and I kind of like this a little better, but I've liked everything of hers that I've read, including I think I've only read one of her short stories, but I liked that too. So I've been hoarding her books. I have a ton of them. I will eventually read them all, but it's gonna take a freaking long time. But the thing about a true auto-read author for me is either they have to be an author where you're fairly certain that they write like 1 or 2 sorts of things and you know what those are and you will read all of those things, or they have to be an author where even if they write something different, you will follow them off of that cliff, even if it feels like something that would be out of your comfort zone. So there are a lot of, relatively new authors whose first and or second books I've really liked. But if they chose to write something different, I may or may not decide that that was going to be something I would want to read. So, for example, as long as Becky Chambers keeps writing the Wayfarers books set in the world of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and A Closed and Common Orbit, I will keep reading them. If she wrote something really, really different though, I might be really excited for it, but I'm not certain I would be prepared to make that leap blind without knowing what that thing was. And I say this as someone who is always really excited to see authors branch out and try something different. I don't want to give the impression that I'm not 100% all for that. I absolutely am. But this isn't a discussion of whether or not we like to see our favorite authors try new things. This is a discussion of whether or not we will unquestionably read whatever our favorite authors choose to write. And the only author I can think of, aside from Robin McKinley, who I would follow off any cliff she chose to lead me off and trust that she was a good enough writer that it would be worth reading, is Catherine M. Valenti. I'm holding up Radiance because this book was that for me. This was a bit of like an oh my gosh, what am I getting myself into? It was a challenging read, it was bizarre, it was different from the other things of hers I've read, and I loved it. Her most recent book, The Refrigerator Monologues, is going to be a bit the same for me because I don't know a ton about superheroes, but I absolutely plan on reading that too because she is an author who I trust when it comes to expanding my reading horizons. Now, she also has a very extensive backlist that I might not catch up on anytime soon, if ever. And she's also quite prolific. Like, I haven't read the Refrigerator Monologues yet. I'm still trying to finish the Fairyland series, and she's got a whole new book coming out in September. She's also a very prolific short fiction writer, and she has stories published in a lot of publications that I just don't read. And I'm pretty sure I will never read all of her short stories. There are just so many of them. And to be honest, I haven't loved her short fiction that I've read as much as her novels. I don't know how much short fiction should count in the calculation of whether someone or not is an auto-read author for you, though. But the quality of I'm willing to try something new because you wrote it, that really is, I think, a key quality. There are also authors who write really distinct sets of things, and I might say I will read all of your X things, but I have no particular interest in reading all of your Y things. So the author that I'm thinking about here is Ursula Vernon, aka T. Kingfisher. She writes for kids as Ursula Vernon and for adults as T. Kingfisher. As an author, she's a relatively new discovery for me. I would never have discovered her books had it not been for BookTube, because her adult novels really are very low profile, and her most well-known kids' books are not something I would have come across as an adult and said, my goodness, does this author write anything for grown-ups? Because I'm not a kid and I don't have a kid. Now, something like this, Castle Hangnail, is really looks like a middle grade-ish book, and I think I'm really going to enjoy this. In fact, I'm planning on reading this in October because it looks like a perfect Halloween book for me. But I've read the first couple books in her Dragon Breath series for kids, which I would say are an age group below middle grade, just to see what those are, and because I wanted to give them to a kid in my family. And I enjoy them, but there's no reason for me to keep reading those books. I'm really here for her adult writing, and I know it's not what earns her her living. What earns her her living is those Dragon Breath books and the Hamster Princess books. I'm not ever going to need to read all of those, but I do intend to read all of her things that she's published, at least at this point, for adults. Another author where I'm willing to say, yes, I will read a certain subset of their work, and that subset is really extensive, is Terry Pratchett. Terry Pratchett is no longer alive, so he's no longer writing, so that helps in being able to say which of his books I will read and which I will not. He's not going to write anything new that I'm going to have to decide whether or not to read. That said, I fully intend to eventually, over the course of many years, read all of the Discworld books. There are some other things that he wrote in his life that aren't Discworld, and I don't particularly have any intention to read them. The majority of his books, though, are in the Discworld series, and I am going to read them. Does that make Terry Pratchett an auto-read author for me if I'm planning on reading, how many Discworld books are there? A lot. There are a lot. If I'm planning on reading like this vast quantity of books, but there are a few of his books that I don't think I need to read, does that mean that Terry Pratchett can't be an auto-read author for me? I don't know, you decide. And then there are a whole lot of authors in this sort of gray in-between zone where I'm very hopeful from what I've seen of their writing so far that I will continue to like everything they write from here on out. For example, Laini Taylor. I really liked the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. From what I gather, I think I'm really going to like Strange the Dreamer. This sounds like I'm really going to enjoy it from all of the reviews I've heard so far. That said, I read her previous short story collection, Let's Touch 3 Times, and I thought it was just okay. So I'm not sure if I want to go back in her backlist history and read her first 2 books, which were the Fairies of Dreadmark duology. It seems to me like her writing is improving over time, so she's an author who I probably will continue to read as long as she's publishing more books in this vein, but I'm not necessarily going to go back and read those first books, that debut novel and its sequel. And then there are the sort of authors whose future in writing is a complete mystery. Like, we all on BookTube here love The Night Circus, and Erin Morgenstern is apparently writing a second book, but no one knows what the heck it is. Will I read it? Probably, if it sounds like something I'm gonna like. If it doesn't sound like something I'm gonna like, I'm not gonna read it. We don't know what that book's gonna be yet. And being on BookTube, and watching other booktubers who are talking about and reviewing new books constantly, there are a ton of exciting new authors that I learn about all the time, whose books I pick up, excited to read, and some of which I really like. And I am super excited to follow their careers as they progress, as they write more things. Which of these will become auto-read authors for me? It depends on what I think of what they write in the future. So that's how my sort of rambly auto-read author video is going to wind down for now. I'd love to hear what you think about what makes an author an auto-read author for you, what that means for you. And I'd like to know what some of your auto-read authors are and why you categorize them as auto-read authors. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.